Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage in the sunny state of Maine. It's pretty warm. Looks like we're in for a nice stretch of weather for the next week or so. As I started shooting this video, I can tell my voice is kind of cracking a little bit. I woke up a couple days ago with a sore throat. It hasn't progressed beyond that. Seems to be getting better. I don't have any other symptoms, thankfully. I haven't been sick in a couple years thanks to all this social distancing and mask wearing and hand washing and all that stuff. So if there's a positive, I always look for the positive. I get to spend more time at home with my family, and I haven't been sick, at least with head colds and stuff, very often. So you got to find the positive in it. I changed your perspective today. You look in this direction. My perspective looks like every other day pretty much, or at least in streaks. I seem to do, transmissions in streaks, and hopefully I'll get back to doing something else at least for a week or so. Because I got to tell you, I love the assembly part, but it's just a whole lot of washing parts to get to that point. I've tried every method possible. It's just the way it is. It's got to go from greasy, grimy. This thing had a layer of mung on it that did a nice job preserving it inside. The aluminum and everything is beautiful. Ends up being a really nice unit. So you can't judge a book by its cover. From the outside, it was the worst looking one I had. And it was leaking all over the floor. So I rolled it over here. 86 1-ton. According to the tag on the side, near as I can decipher. And it's the standard recipe, 800 to 1,000 horsepower, depending on weight and other variables, I suppose. But I have graduated to the ATD valve bodies. I love them. I got more in order. This is the last one I had. I'll finish it off with a nice looking pan once I finish up with the pump. Yesterday, one of the first things I do, if you want to talk transmission for a minute, is to make sure the modulator valve moves freely in the case. So I had everything out of the package, so once I got up to the center support, could put the bolt in, I went ahead and stuck the valve body on, just gets it off the bench. So the order that you do it doesn't really matter unless for some reason you have to pull it back apart, and then you got to pull the valve body back off. So just don't drop anything down inside, and everything will be fine. I have the man door open today. It's so nice out. Occasionally I get a little chipmunk that runs in to say hi. One day he went through the oil bucket. That wasn't very good, but seems like he made it past that and through the winter. He's been to visit me today already. You can hear the birds chirping, so you're welcome for that. And just as I started talking, I can hear the sounds of what seems to be a sawmill or some kind of saw howling away in the background. So if you hear that, don't be alarmed. Speaking of washing parts, you can just see it over the way in the back. There's a red parts washer, traditional style. It sits on the drum, a drum-mounted parts washer, I guess technically what it's called. So the fluid is not where you're working on cleaning the parts. The fluid is down in the barrel underneath. So I bought it in 1997, and I remember it very vividly. I was going out to eat that night, and I'd come home with 10 gallons of Varsol, or whatever the brand was, parts washer fluid. And because I got calculating that I really needed 15 gallons on the way home, I stopped and bought 5 gallons of kerosene. And I've never forgave myself. I've dealt with that heating oil smell since 1996 or 7. Finally, the other day, I don't use it that often. I usually keep the lid shut. 1, it's a fire hazard with it open. 2, hopefully it keeps it from evaporating. And I guess I did a pretty good job because here it is, 2022. And it just started sputtering because it's out of fluid. So I went shopping around to see what I could find, and there wasn't a whole lot of options. Good old Tractor Supply. I never bought anything online from them, but they'll ship it for free to the local store. So I ordered 10 gallons. Don't ask me why I didn't order 15, but I'll get to that. And immediately I had to set up an account, but then I had tracking information, and it said it was delivered to the store a week and a half ago. and I got an email saying that it had arrived at the store, and I do not come and get it. You'll get another email when it's ready to be picked up. 4 or 5 days go by, and I give them a call. And she looks it up and says, oh yeah, that was that parts washer stuff. Well, when it showed up, it was leaking all over the store, and we had to send them back. But they claim they've ordered more, so I was not able to use it. Again, I don't use it very often, but sometimes it's handy just to get the rough stuff. I scrape everything first, and just to knock off that layer of goo, and then finish it up with brake clean. I use a lot of brake clean. That's the easiest way to get stuff really clean. I probably use too much, but it's the best method. My rotary parts washer, with the aqueous parts washer, hot water, works really great, but it's noisy. You got to plan ahead, and it leaves a film as well. What I like about the film is it has anti-rust properties. Some of this stuff yesterday, the day before, I pressure washed outside and then tried to clean it off afterwards. But if you leave 1 drop of water on it, you'll have a rust spot there. So you have to be careful of that. I was spoiled by the hot parts washer where things don't rust afterwards, but you have to get that coating off. So it's a challenge to get stuff clean. A few weeks ago, I mentioned I went to a swap meet down at New England Dragway in Epping, New Hampshire. And there was a seller there that sells Tri-5 Chevy parts. Now, I have to go back. I've been using the term Tri-5 Chevy since I got the 56 wagon. And it has been brought to my attention that not everybody knows what Tri-5 means. Well, the 1955, 56, and 1957 Chevy car line is known as the Tri-5s. The models leading up to that, up to 54, were a completely different vehicle. And 1958 and up, transitioned into the Impala. But believe it or not, back in 1955, Chevy made a car and they made a truck. And they made a lot of versions of the one car and the one truck. So when I say Tri-5, it's 55, 6, and 7. So he was a seller of parts like that, and one of the items that caught my eye, I've been looking online at all things Tri-5, but I had bought bushings to rebuild my stock control arms and was going to be completely happy with that. Although I know from the factory, there's not a lot of caster, mostly to benefit the fact you have a manual steering box, so it probably makes it steer easier, but I was looking at the aftermarket control arms, and they offer a 2-inch lowering of the vehicle with the stock length spring and up to 5 degrees more caster. I was intrigued, but I'd seen them advertised to $275 to $400. The set that this guy had on display down there, he wanted $550 for them, and I could see that they were the same ones I could buy anywhere, so I did a little shopping around and bought a set on eBay. The reason I wanted them after I saw the ones on display and was able to touch them in real life is these things are pretty impressive. That's 1 5/8 tubing, and this thing's a beast. It appears to take stock ball joints. If I can find a flaw, which I can, the upper ball joint doesn't have a grease fitting. I hear a backup alarm, so I gotta see what that is. It was an oil truck delivering some liquid gold down the driveway next to my property. So the aftermarket control arms of unknown brand, I still don't know what brand they are, that I put in the Nova, I was impressed with the geometry, the way it worked out, but I wasn't really impressed with the quality. It had some things I didn't like. I like these because they actually have castle nuts and cotter pins holding the adjustment on the nylon bushings. I've read a lot of good reviews about them, and I paid like $270 delivered, so I guess I'm not rebuilding my stock control arms on the 56 wagon, and it's going to get some aftermarket control arms. A few videos ago, I was showing you the 1956 Chevy factory assembly manual, I also have one for 72 Nova. I have one for my 49 Chevrolet pickup. And I was actually reading the introduction in the beginning of it because I never gave these manuals a lot of thought. What these are, I mean, for me, they're really handy because I can see how things are supposed to be put together. What I didn't know is, let's say my 56 manual, midway through the 1955 production run, Chevrolet would, for all their car lines, have designed the next model year, the 56, and they released this book, one for each assembly line, one plant. So there's probably less than 12 of these ever made. And the instructions are, before they go into full production, they're going to trial assemble a few vehicles to make sure that this book is in the right order, because this is front to back how the vehicle was assembled on the assembly line. Pretty fascinating. If there was any changes during this mock production run, the one page had explicit instructions to be removed after there was some communication, I guess, with the mothership, and one page would come down, or one for each plant, and they were supposed to put it in its correct order and destroy the other page. And at the end of the production run, each of these manuals was supposed to be destroyed. So guys like me would never get my hands on them. But fortunately, somebody either found them, bought them, whatever, probably from the originals. I doubt it's one that was in the assembly plant. You got to figure that one might have been really beat up, and has been able to reproduce it. Like I mentioned in the other video, this particular brand comes bound like a book, which is really handy, but I don't find the pages as clear. But like they tell you, a lot of that can be from missing pages or how many times it was reproduced. You got to figure, well, my 1956 manual or my 1949 Chevy manual, they didn't really have modern printing capabilities like we have now. We're kind of spoiled now, so I'm pretty impressed. The last manual I bought was the 1956 Chevy, and it's pretty clear and really handy. So, fascinating little tidbit. That's the actual way to build the vehicle from scratch. A little sidebar, I did a little research on my 56 wagon. I know it was assembled in California, but I believe the body was made in St. Louis, Missouri, at Fisher Body, one of their plants. So somehow that body, probably by train, would get shipped out the assembly line, and there's a lot of notes in here that says installed by Fisher Body. So when they made the cab, if you will, the sheet metal for the car, they were tasked with putting in a lot of things already. So maybe when it made for a seamless transition somewhat when it actually got down the assembly line. But I love looking at all the old assembly line videos that keep popping up on Facebook and whatnot, just to study what's going on there. It's amazing how they did things and make it look so easy, and didn't scratch the heck out of the sheet metal and all that stuff, and somehow it ran when it was all done. Also kind of fascinating to think about, the 20s when Henry Ford came up with the assembly line process. There were no options. You could get any color you want as long as it was black and things like that. He made one vehicle, that's what you got. And at the time, that fit a purpose. But when competition comes along, by the 40s and 50s and 60s, there was a different sheet metal and model year change every year, and a host of different options. And then, of course, they expanded car lines to compete with whatever was coming down the line. Compact vehicles in the 70s. That became an area where the big three needed to compete with the imports. And nowadays, it's gone back a little the other way. Especially in the imported cars, they kind of brought a strategy over where they only sell one car in 3 trim levels, and you pick one, 1, 2, and 3. And each one comes with different hardware, and that's the way they make them. So, whereas American cars, you can probably still order every last little tidbit that you want and wait for a year and a half to get it because we don't build chips here anymore. My week started on Monday, probably like yours did. I had received a phone call from a nice old gentleman who's 80 years old. I have known of him forever, it seems, years, decades. But I never spoke a word to him. I've seen him at a couple car shows. He was a stock car guy. I was a drag racer guy. He's obviously, considerably older than me. But I'd always heard great things about him. He used to have a body shop and all kinds of cool stuff. But here he was calling me because he has a 40 Chevy that he had an accident with last fall, apparently. And being a body man all his life, over the winter he's put it all back together, but there was a bracket broken off the aluminum radiator, and he heard I could weld aluminum. And would I do it for him? I joked because I said, I'm very much still learning, but I'll be glad to practice on your radiator. He said, well, it can't be any worse than it is. And what happened was I made a new friend. He dropped it off. I had it fixed in a little while. I was going to the grocery store before noon on Monday anyway, so he's only less than a mile from there. So I dropped it off and I got to go in the shop. We sat down and talked. It was really fun to make a new friend. And he is the epitome of what I want to do at 80 years old, is sit in my shop in my comfy chair and stare at my hot rod or work on it, just like he was. He's not giving up. He's still going, plenty healthy. Can't wait to get back. He's probably back on the road with it now. So he was happy with the work I did. It only had to weld about that much, but aluminum and the frustrations that can entail. So I probably had an hour in the project, just, laying stuff out, getting it done, but it came out pretty good. So I was happy, he was happy, and that was cool. Simultaneously, I was contacted by an 18-year-old guy who thought he had Turbo 400 problems. Turns out he had Turbo 350 problems, which was converted from a 700 R4. Back in the day, they used to sell a little adapter kit. You'd use a 6-inch two-wheel drive transmission, lop off about an inch off the tail output shaft. There was an aluminum block that still used the 700 R4 stuff to make your drive shafts all fit. And I was able to walk him through all that, and he found a used transmission. And I haven't heard back, which is always good, but dealing with an 80-year-old who calls on the phone and is very direct, and you just know you're dealing with the salt of the earth. And here's an 18-year-old kid who I'm Facebook friends with him, but I've only met him one other time. But he's local, and if you're a car person local, and he wants to be, you pretty much know everything. Another reason why you always treat people right, because you've only got your reputation, and word travels fast. And it's not that big a circle. So I'm glad to see an 18-year-old kid. I was glad to help him. Hope he realizes he has lots to learn, but he's learning every day. So hopefully he's back on the road. He had a square body Chevy, so with a big block that had blown up, and then now he's put an LS in it, but hey, whatever. I hope it worked out for him as well. So that's it for today. I believe I hear the school bus coming, so I got to run up and catch it. I think by next year, he's going to want to get off the bus without me standing there waiting. That progression is already happening, You can't stop it. You just have to embrace it. But that's life. Hope you're having a great week, and I'll catch you in a couple days.